Hi, thank you for joining us today with A Talk with Ted. We gather each week with Pastor Ted, who is a retired pastor and counselor, still doing some counseling in the area, and we've been talking about some of the issues that are surrounding the isolation of COVID-19. And Pastor Ted, what are we going to be talking about today?
I want to talk a little bit about relationships because we've been forced into this tightly knit family now, and we've had to, for the last 2 months, live together without a lot of outside influence. I think it'd be good to talk about that, the relationships we can face.
Yeah, a lot of people have been cooped up in the house for weeks maybe, and they're not used to doing that, right?
That's right.
And so they're learning how to do communication a little bit different, and maybe they're not doing that very well.
It's possible.
Are we going to talk about some of those things?
That's what I'd like to. I heard the other day on the news that there's quite a high volume of people calling divorce lawyers.
Yeah, I heard that.
And I really don't want to see that.
No.
So I want to just talk a little bit about how we communicate with our partner and how we can get the communication back. But first of all, I want to talk about how if I'm uneasy about something that's going on in our relationship, how can I address that issue?
Yeah, sounds good.
And so what I want to do is to talk a little bit about how I address something if I'm not sure how it's going to be received. And one thing I want to do is to impress upon the other person I'm not attacking them. So I don't want to use you statements. I never want to say you never do this or you always do this, because that's probably not true. If we've done it once, right once, we've done it once.
Right.
And so I wanted to be able to say, this is how I feel. This is what I think, and this is what I know. And this takes a little bit of practice for both of us to get onto that, because if I can understand how I feel and if I can effectively communicate that to my partner, it can be a very good advance to the other person listening and the other person trying to find resolution.
Okay.
So when I say I feel upset or angry, the normal response is from the other person is, well, don't be angry. Well, I just told you I was angry, so don't tell me not to feel what I feel.
Right.
But I want to understand what that looks like for you. So when I hear that I statement, this is coming from me to you, and so I need to say this is how I'm feeling right now. And if the other person wants to put their thoughts in before I get a chance, I need to say time out. Just hold on a second now. I want to express to you how I feel. My phrase that helps me to get across to the other person is, I could be right and I could be wrong, but this is how I feel.
Okay.
So when you hear that, you automatically, because you've made up your mind that I'm wrong, you automatically say, okay, let him dig in a little deeper here. And
and it might detract from defensiveness too, right?
That's right. So if I can express how I feel, and when I hear that I feel, I think I know, I want to stop and think, okay, this isn't about me. This is about my wife's response or my kid's response. You can use this with your kids as well. But if I can stop and say, okay, let me understand what she's thinking and what she's feeling at this point, or what she's what she knows about the situation, and listen to that. And then as I express that, then I can come back and say, okay, so I think you addressed this a couple of weeks ago on your podcast. I need to say, okay, tell me what that looks like for you. Tell me, or this is what I hear you saying. Tell me what that, am I right that you're angry because of something I did? No, it's not about what you did.
Okay.
It's about how I feel about something that maybe happened in the home or maybe happened outside of the home, and we kind of can talk about the solution of that.
Okay. So you're giving them an opportunity to clarify what you've said. Is that right?
That's right. So there's aggressive communication. That's when I come after you with kind of a vengeance or anger. Or there's assertive communication. And this is assertive communication. This is saying, this is how I'm feeling. This is what I know. The other one, the other part of this is active listening.
Okay.
It's hard to be a listener when you know, when you're an A personality like myself.
Yeah.
But we can train ourselves to listen, because when you hear those trigger statements, I feel, I think, I know, I need to say to myself, shut up, Ted. 2 ears and one mouth. Maybe I need to listen twice as much as I speak right now.
Yeah.
And if you think about that, it ties into that verse that says that I should be careful of what I say with my tongue, because my tongue can be deadly.
Mm-hmm.
And I need to be really, really careful how I respond to
Mhm.
people that are going through that.
Well, and here's the thing I think about too is that while we're talking, what we tend to do is we're thinking about what we want to say in response.
That's right.
And that's incorrect too, right?
That's right.
So how do we train ourselves to listen without doing that? Because that seems like it's kind of a natural response for us.
It is, but I need to understand that I, for me, is a trigger to say, okay, stop
Okay.
and listen to what's being said.
Mm-hmm.
And if I can learn to do that, the problem is we get aggressive because we want to make our point, and we're not really thinking about the other person's feeling. We're just
Right.
thinking about what we're going through in our own hearts.
Right.
And I need to stop and say, okay, slow down a little bit, and allow God's word to be in control of my situation at this time, and just allow that to take place.
Mm-hmm.
We hear a lot about the listening part. We'll talk about that maybe next week. But we hear a lot about the listening part. But I think I can do a lot by just thinking through before I speak what I want to say, and thinking through how that's going to be received. If the other person is naturally defensive, I need to say to the other person, I care about you, and if it's a husband-wife relationship, I love you and I want to be in this relationship.
Mhm.
I'm not threatening to
Mm-hmm.
leave the relationship,
Yeah.
but we have an issue here we need to talk about,
Mhm.
and this is what I'm feeling at this point.
Mhm. Okay.
And if I can find that place of saying, okay, and then it takes a little training for the other person to say, okay, now it's listening, and that's the timeout, or just, whoa, a
Mhm.
minute,
Mhm.
I just want you to hear where I'm coming from, and then we can turn it the other way and say,
Mhm.
okay, what do you think?
So, Ted, is it good to, when you begin this communication, to lay those ground rules ahead of time, or how do you get into that conversation?
I think one of the strategies you can use if the other person is not used to it is that
Mhm.
timeout.
Okay.
If you can say, okay, when I do that, it's not trying to cut you off, but I'm trying to explain to you where I'm coming from. And then that statement, I could be right or I could be wrong, but this is what I'm feeling.
Oh, okay.
That gives you a bridge to be able to hear the other person's point of view too, because they may disagree with you. And sometimes, I've been married for 52 years, and sometimes there can be those communication gaps, but we've learned to be able to say, okay, let's be careful what we say so that we can bridge that so it doesn't become destructive in our relationship.
I read in a book recently where they talked about slowing things down.
Yeah.
We generally, it's like, boom, 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 firecracker stuff. And they said in the book, in communication, you slow it down.
Mhm.
And I liked what you said. Think about what you're going to say before you say it, right?
That's right. If you can stop and think through maybe a little bit of the character of the other person and say, okay, how do I say this so that it's kind? I noticed something here when you talk about think. I found this on the web today, and I thought that was very good. Think. T, is it true?
Mhm.
H, is it healthy? Or I'd even ask that, helpful there.
Okay.
I, does it inspire? N, is it necessary? And K, is it kind? If you can take those thoughts and say, okay, evaluate what you're going to say before you're going to say it,
Mhm.
because sometimes in anger we just let it go, and we need to stop and say, okay, I need to sit down, I need to relax, I need to say, okay, how am I going to present this so it doesn't become destructive in a relationship? And I'll
Okay.
tell you, it's difficult because we're used to going out to work, we're used to coming home for supper, or maybe sitting down as a family. We're used to doing things in the evening that are sometimes together, sometimes
Mhm.
separately, and now we're here. We're
Mm.
stuck here with the
Right.
kids on their backs, and we need to stop and say, okay, now how do we make this work so that
Mhm.
some of the people out there are teaching their children at home, and that's difficult.
Yeah.
And maybe even a time we'll talk about the children. How do we
Yeah.
communicate with our children
Yeah.
so we don't yell at
Yeah, it
them?
seems to me that we're taught how to talk really well, but we're not really taught how to listen very well. So maybe that'll be the next time that we
I-
get together.
I think we need to
talk
talk
about
a little
that.
bit about the listening
Okay.
part, because that's an important part of this.
Okay. Well, this is a good start. Can you summarize what you said then? the steps that we should take?
I think we need to stop and think through what we're going to say.
Okay.
And then we need to phrase it from our point of view as a reason of thinking how I'm feeling, what I think, what I know, rather than you.
Mm-hmm.
And it may be about me, and she's pointing at me and saying it's you. But if she can say, this is what I think, this is what I feel, this is what I know, it's less argumentative, and I can listen to that. And if my wife is saying something to me, I can give that back to her and say, okay, this is what I hear you saying. And she can either say, yeah, that's what I'm saying, or not. And then we can kind of negotiate where we go from there. And I think that can be very, very helpful.
Okay.
And then just, we should start off with prayer. We
Yeah.
should start off
Well.
praying and asking God to give us the right
Mhm.
words. And I think that's an important part too.
Mhm.
But as a Christian, I want to honor God with everything I do. My mouth and my tongue can be very dangerous.
Yeah.
If I can stop and think about what that looks like, it can really change the way I respond to things.
Good.
Yeah.
This is a good start on relationships and how to communicate. And we're going to continue next week. So I hope that you'll tune in next Wednesday when we have another one of these talks with Ted. Thanks for joining us today.